The day I walked in and saw their bewildered faces, the very people who once laughed in my face, I said just one thing before opening my laptop. Funny how the ones who once mocked the clerk are now asking him for a meeting. Welcome to Reddit Stories. This is the place where we share real stories from anonymous Reddit users. I still remember the first time I met Emily's family. I was wearing my best button-up shirt, holding a bottle of mid-range wine, standing nervously in front of a beautiful suburban house that screamed old money. Emily had squeezed my hand, smiled at me, and whispered, "They'll love you. Just be yourself." That was the last time I believed that. Her father opened the door with a glance so sharp I could almost hear it cut through my self-esteem. Her mother didn't even bother hiding her disapproval. And her older brother? He didn't shake my hand. He just looked me up and down like he was scanning a clearance item at a thrift store. "So, Daniel, what do you do?" her father asked during dinner. "I'm a clerk at a logistics firm downtown." I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a moment of silence, and then a soft chuckle from her brother. Her mom raised an eyebrow. "A clerk? Emily, you always said you wanted to marry someone ambitious." Emily smiled awkwardly. "Daniel is ambitious. He's smart, kind." Her dad cut in, "Kind doesn't pay the bills, sweetheart." They laughed. At me, like I wasn't even in the room. That night as we left, Emily apologized, but I told her it was fine. I didn't want to be the reason she fought with her family. But deep down, something cracked. Not because I was embarrassed, but because I realized something. No matter how much I loved her, no matter how good I was to her, to them, I would always be just a clerk. And that wasn't the worst part. What really stung was how their words started creeping into our home. Slowly, Emily changed. The late-night cuddles turned into cold shoulders. She began comparing me to other men, her friends' husbands, successful co-workers. She'd say things like, "I wish you had more ambition. You're comfortable being average, aren't you? Maybe you should think bigger." I was thinking bigger. I had dreams, plans, but I wasn't moving fast enough for her or her family. One night, she came home from dinner with her parents and said, "They're right, Daniel. We're just in different places in life." I looked at her, stunned. "You mean you want out?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. That weekend, they threw her a birthday party. I wasn't invited, not even a text. While they popped champagne and laughed under string lights in the backyard, I sat alone in our apartment, packing my bags. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just made one silent promise to myself. One day, they'll regret laughing at me. Moving out felt like erasing myself. I left the apartment key on the counter with a note. No hard feelings. I just need space to breathe. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't bitter. It was quiet, like the way people disappear from your life when you're no longer enough. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment above a diner. The walls were thin, the floor creaked, and the shower groaned like an old man with bad knees, but it was mine. No judgment. No cold glances over dinner. No subtle digs masked as concern. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think, and what I heard wasn't pretty. "You're not good enough. She deserved better. You're just a damn clerk." Their voices echoed in my head like ghosts I couldn't evict. But in that cheap apartment, eating dollar ramen and staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., I decided something. If they were going to hate me either way, I might as well become someone worth hating for the right reasons. I didn't know exactly what that meant yet, but I knew I was done playing small just to stay lovable. The next day, I pulled out an old notebook I used to keep in college, filled with scribbles, ideas, half-baked business plans. Dreams I'd buried under rent, routine, and someone else's expectations. I circled one idea I had written years ago. Software for small business inventory. Easy, cheap, reliable. I didn't know how to build it, but I knew how to learn. So I worked my day job. And at night, I studied. Coding tutorials, business podcasts, free online courses. I watched YouTube videos until my eyes burned. I joined forums, asked dumb questions, got smarter. I failed. A lot. One night, My prototype crashed my laptop. Another time, I lost an entire week's progress because I forgot to save. No one was watching. No one cared. And that, oddly enough, was freeing. Because without their eyes on me, I could mess up, I could get better, I could grow. Meanwhile, I heard bits and pieces about Emily. She moved back in with her parents. Got a new boyfriend, some finance guy with a square jaw and perfect teeth. I saw one photo of them online, standing next to her family at a charity event. They looked like a Ralph Lauren ad. And yet, I didn't feel jealous. I felt grateful, because if she hadn't left, I'd still be shrinking myself to fit in her world. Instead, I was quietly building my own. By the end of that first year, I had a basic version of the app. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I pitched it to a local hardware store owner I met at the diner downstairs. He was skeptical, but desperate. Try it for free, I said. If it helps, we'll talk. It helped. That was my first client, my first win, and something inside me clicked. This wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. This was about finally becoming the man I knew I could be, long before they ever laughed. They say starting a business is like planting a tree. The early days are quiet, slow, and invisible. No one sees the roots forming underground. That's exactly what my life felt like. I still work my 9-to-5 at the logistics company, filing reports, sending emails, answering phones. But every free second, lunch breaks, late nights, weekends, I poured into the app. Tweaking code, fixing bugs, cold emailing potential clients, watching videos on UI design and small business marketing until I passed out at my desk. I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was chasing purpose. The app, which I named Stack Easy, started picking up steam. One small business told another. A bakery recommended it to a local bike shop. Word of mouth became my first marketing strategy, and surprisingly it worked, but it wasn't glamorous. My first year brought in just enough to cover my rent and keep the lights on. I slept 4 hours a night, drank more instant coffee than water, and constantly questioned if I was in over my head. There were days I want to quit, days when the code wouldn't run, days when customers didn't pay, days when I'd stare at my reflection in the bathroom mirror and whisper, "What are you even doing?" But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered that dinner table. The smirks, the sideways glances, the way her dad had said, "Kind doesn't pay the bills." And I'd sit back down and keep going. By year 2, I had a small team, just 2 people I met through a startup forum. Maya, a UX designer who worked freelance from her garage, and Jorge, a self-taught back-end wizard who ran on Red Bull and sarcasm. We were broke, scrappy, and half-broken, but damn, we were hungry. Together, we rebuilt Stack Easy from the ground up. The product became sleeker, faster, and more reliable. We started charging subscriptions. Small ones at first, $19 a month. But when 100 customers signed up, then 500, and then 1,000, it hit me. We weren't trying anymore. We were doing it. The turning point came when we landed our first big contract. A regional chain of supply stores needed inventory software for all 47 locations. I pitched to them over Zoom in a wrinkled dress shirt, sitting in front of a fake bookshelf background I downloaded the night before. When they said yes, I didn't even celebrate. I just sat in silence for a full minute. It was working. All the nights alone, all the silence, all the humiliation. It was finally turning into something real. One evening, while walking home from the office, a tiny rented space above a dry cleaner, I passed by a couple arguing on the sidewalk. The woman said something sharp, and the man just took it like it wasn't the first time. His shoulders slumped, his eyes dead. It hit me harder than I expected. I used to be that guy, always trying to be good enough for someone who never really saw me. I stopped, looked up at the stars, and let out a shaky breath. I wasn't rich, I wasn't famous, but for the first time in years, I was proud, and I knew this was only the beginning. Success doesn't arrive with fireworks. It sneaks in quietly, steadily, like the rising tide. One morning, I opened my inbox and found a message from an unfamiliar name. Brian Monroe, For a second, I didn't recognize it. Then it hit me. Emily's brother. Subject line. Hey, long time no talk. I stared at it for a full minute before clicking. Hey, Daniel. Hope you're doing well. I saw your company in that Tech Today article. Congrats, man. Seriously impressive stuff. Anyway, just wondering if you're hiring. I've been in between roles and thought maybe there's a place for me on your team. Let me know if you're open to chatting. No apology. No mention of the years he mocked me. Just a smooth pivot, like nothing ever happened. I didn't reply. 2 days later, I got a phone call from a number I hadn't saved in years. It was Emily's father. Daniel, he said, his voice a little too cheerful. I heard your company's doing very well. That's quite the turnaround. You've really made something of yourself. I kept quiet. He chuckled nervously. Listen, we're working on a little side venture. Family run. Could use a tech-savvy partner, maybe even a small investment. Thought of you, of course. You're practically family. Practically family. The same man who once laughed in my face for being a clerk now wanted me to invest in his failing venture. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so absurd. But the kicker? The part that made my chest tighten? 2 weeks later, I walked into a networking event in the city. And there she was, Emily, standing near the bar, alone, swirling her drink in a way I recognized instantly. She hadn't changed much. Still graceful, still striking. But her eyes carried something new. Tiredness, maybe regret. She spotted me. There was a beat of hesitation. Then she walked over. Daniel, she said, her voice softer than I remembered. You look amazing. Thanks. I replied, keeping it polite. We talked, small talk mostly. She mentioned seeing the article about Stack Easy. Said she was so happy for me. That she always knew I had potential. I didn't say much. Just listened. Watched her try to rewrite history with flattery. Then she paused. You know, she said, looking down at her glass, I made a lot of assumptions back then. About what success looked like. About you. I was wrong. For a second, I felt that old ache. That little piece of me that once begged for her approval. But it was gone as fast as it came. I looked her in the eyes and said calmly, I'm not mad, Emily. Honestly, I should thank you. You leaving was the best thing that ever happened to me. She blinked, swallowed hard. Do you ever think about us? I smiled, not out of spite, but out of peace. I used to. Now, I just think about who I became without you. And with that, I excused myself. That night, I walked home alone to the city lights. Coat collar turned up against the wind. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt free. Free from the need to prove anything. Free from the voices in my head. Free from the old version of me who thought he needed their validation to be enough. Because now I knew better. I didn't build Stack Easy to get revenge. I built it to become the man I always knew I could be, with or without their applause. Success has a way of bringing old ghosts to your doorstep. About a month after that encounter with Emily, I received a formal meeting request from a consulting firm. They wanted to pitch a retail tech expansion idea and were hoping to partner with a software company like Stack Easy. It sounded promising, but when I walked into the conference room that morning, I nearly laughed. Sitting at the end of the long table, dressed in suits a little too crisp, with smiles a little too wide, was Emily's entire family. Her father, her mother, and yes, Brian, her brother, now balding slightly. His once smug face softened with time. I took a breath, adjusted my blazer, and walked in. Daniel, her father, stood up, arms open. Great to see you again. You've really made a name for yourself. I nodded. Thanks. Didn't realize this was the meeting. He chuckled, like we were old friends sharing a private joke. We thought it was time to reconnect. Clean slate, right? You know, water under the bridge. They launched into a pitch, some retail-adjacent investment project they were trying to salvage. They needed software. Capital. Young energy, as her mom put it. Apparently, their previous backers had pulled out, and they were exploring more visionary partners. They were desperate and suddenly polite. painfully polite. Brian even cracked a joke about our rocky first impression, as if being smug and demeaning years ago could now be repackaged as a funny anecdote. I let them finish. Then I leaned back in my chair and looked each of them in the eye, not with malice, not with revenge in mind, but with clarity. You know, I began, there was a time when I would have done anything to sit at your table. I used to think your approval meant something. They shifted in their seats. But here's what I've learned. You only respect people when they come with title or a checkbook, not when they come with kindness, not when they come with love. I stood up, collected my notes, none of which I needed. I built Stack Easy with people who believed in me when I had nothing, and those are the people I invest in. Her father tried to say something, but I raised a hand gently. I'm not angry. In fact, I wish you well. I just don't do business with people who only call when they need something. And with that, I walked out. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt complete. Because real success isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about no longer needing to. That evening, I walked into my office where Maya and Jorge were cracking open beers to celebrate our latest funding round. I joined them, raised a bottle, and toasted not to money or victory, but to freedom. Freedom from seeking validation. Freedom from shrinking to fit into other people's expectations. Freedom to be exactly who I am. No apologies, no explanations. Welcome to Reddit Stories, and thank you for listening to a true tale, shared by someone anonymous, but deeply real. See you in the next story.